Let's, Tyler Palmer's here. Tyler, would you come up and address the snow issue on this plan? See, so we can talk about it right now, so, because there's been comments, several comments on that, please.
Certainly, Mayor Lambert. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate having the time to take a minute and chat about this. I'm Tyler Palmer. I direct the Operations Division for the City of Moscow's Public Works Department. Included in the council packet, I believe there's a memo from Steve Schulte, who's our street supervisor. We had the opportunity, as the plans came together from the Transportation Commission, to perform a maintenance review on the plans as they were presented. That's an important part of anything that we do, is we get plans that are generated throughout the department that'll get sent over to our Operations Division, which is something that, just another indicator of how well the City of Moscow runs. You know, a lot of times Operations Divisions, the engineering works in a bubble and things just happen, and then they drop in our lap, and it's here, figure out how to deal with this. And so we really appreciate the coordination that we have throughout the department, that we get the opportunity to look at these things, because ultimately we can build a lot of things, but if we can't maintain them, it doesn't do us a lot of good. And so, yeah, we appreciate the ability to be a part of that process. Two things that I'd like to preface my comments with is, we have a wonderful professional streets department. We really have wonderful staff who look at these things and they take very seriously their job. We train them well, we equip them well, and we expect high levels of service. There's an expectation of very urban amenities here in Moscow, and so they take their job very seriously. I mean, some examples are snow removal. Over the last 5 years, we've diminished the time that takes by 40%. You know, we've increased our sweeping. There's a lot of things that they've done to really take pride in our community, like we all do. The second thing that I'll mention is that we run very lean. We don't have guys standing around. We run a very lean department. Gary gives a presentation each year when he compares our staff per population to a lot of surrounding communities. And as a general rule, the City of Moscow runs lean, and that holds true for our streets department. So as we look at a lot of these things, we like to be problem solvers. That's what we're called upon to do. We get told what the desires of the community are, and we try and figure out how to make it work. As we looked at Plan C, we had some definite concerns, and I think they're captured in the memo that Steve has generated. Steve Schulte's here if anyone has any additional questions. Does a wonderful job keeping our streets department going. There are some infrastructure improvements that would be necessary, especially in that block-and-a-half stretch that Les McDonald indicated, in order to make it feasible.
Are you talking about between Blaine and Hayes?
Yeah, we've got about a block and a half where we have that stretch where we don't have a green strip and we just don't have anywhere to physically store the snow. Plan C is definitely the most challenging from a maintenance perspective. It will take a larger maintenance investment over the years for the community. That was the one stretch where we had really no answer for how do we do it without some sort of accommodation, the addition of some green strips, some infrastructure improvements. With that, we can make it work. I mean, it's something that we can do and that we can work with. It will take more staff time. It takes more of an investment. And so as we look at those things, it's just, I wouldn't say that trepidation is the right word that we approach it with, but just trying to be realistic about the investment of time that it takes. Every additional thing that we add, every additional investment that we have to make from an hour standpoint, it's additional sweeping, it's additional equipment, it's different equipment than we currently have. You know, we don't have a sweeper that'll fit in that lane. And we can get creative. We can look around and say, okay, maybe the university has a smaller one that we can come up with some sort of cooperative agreement. I mean, we do this kind of stuff all the time. But we just, you know, we try and go into it with our eyes open and say, with an already very highly tasked staff that we're adding maintenance hours to, there just needs to be an understanding as we move forward. If we come back and say, hey, you know, we've run out of the ability to either service levels have to diminish or staff levels have to increase. At some point, there's a giving point where we're doing what we can with the people that we have, and we're very close to saturation with that. So that would be the only understanding that I would ask for through this process. But with the infrastructure accommodation through the stretch that Les had indicated, we believe that we can come up with a maintenance plan that will be more maintenance intensive for us, no doubt, but we can make it work.
Catherine, did you have a question?
Well, I just remember, do you remember the conversation that you and I had at one of the open houses about whether or not we actually need to plow in the winter, which would be a conversation that we'd have to open up to the population, because we know that the particular group that's going to be using this bike lane will probably not be using it the 60% that this is attracting. And so maybe there's some options so that you might not have to plow. So it could possibly not impact the maintenance department in a negative way, because I know Mr. Schulte, you're your memo was from December 20th. And so it was, prior to a lot of other conversations about, Plan C. So I just didn't know if maybe you all had talked about, well, what if we don't or do this?
We had some pretty extensive conversations in the aftermath of that. We had the opportunity to meet with several of the subcommittee members. Mike Lowry and Steve and I spent probably 2 hours in my office running through options. We spent some time at the open house, as you indicated, discussing that with a lot of people. And then in the aftermath of that, we were able to get together with our Public Works Director, with Les McDonald. Steve and I were able to sit down and kind of talk through what are options, and looking at different alternatives. Steve and Mike and Les and I all got together to discuss what does it look like, do we try and close it seasonally, et cetera. Worked through a lot of those, and without getting into a ton of conversation, in order to maintain the traffic calming that we're desiring, with the vertical elements involved, keeping it open during the winter, or at least keeping it delineated, would probably be necessary. There would be a need for understanding about the timing as far as the maintenance on those facilities go. We probably would not be able to plow that as quickly as we would like in some circumstances, depending on the volume and the size of a storm and other responsibilities that are going on. So there may be times that maintenance is a little bit delayed, and the level is different than what we are typically used to on that 3rd Street corridor as it's currently constituted. But yeah, those were conversations that happened quite extensively since that point.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
want to go to Jim. Jim?
I just wanted to ask Tyler if you've been in contact with other communities that have these kind of facilities in place in typical climates or in similar climates, and how do these people deal with this, and how might we implement their strategies or augment what they do to improve our situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. I think one of the wonderful things that we have is that the council's been very supportive of is professional development for our staff, and so we're able to get training and to attend these sorts of things. There was a great presentation given at the American Public Works Association conference this last year that I attended about bike facilities. It was given by some folks from the Nordic countries, where obviously they have to deal with a lot of snow, and it was specific to bike facilities and maintenance on bike facilities. And so it is something that we work with. Boise, the city of Boise had a similar example fairly recently, where they had an installation, and there was some back and forth with Ada County, because they have a different setup where Ada County does the road maintenance and within the city of Boise. There are ways that we can maintain these things, and there are precedents for these things, and we have the know-how to do it. A lot of it comes down to just having the right equipment to do it. It's a narrower facility, and also I think it also helps really emphasize the reason for the street standards that have been developed. When we ask for green strips, it's really easy to say, oh, let's take out the green strips type of a thing, pushing the sidewalk here and there, this makes it more convenient. But a lot of those things in our climate, we have to really consider what that entails. And so I guess that's a really long answer to say, yes, Jim, we are in contact. There are other examples in areas that get snow, and there are ways that we can work around the challenges that we'll face from it.
Well, it seems to me the difference in cost between the A, B versus C, that we could afford some machinery to deal with that situation specifically, in terms of snow blowers and maybe a specialized Burminator to soak up that snow, and maybe a different brooming device that would deal with that for way less than a lot of concrete.
And a lot of it does come back around to just man hours. It's the time commitment for staff. It may seem like a small thing, but even just something like, now instead of just running a track or a plow in a traditional pattern where the snow is being pushed off to the right-hand side of the plow off to the side of the road, now somebody's got to flip a plow. We've got to push to center. There's a berm left in the center, so you have to try and time it out pretty closely, especially with narrow lanes, so that we push it all to the south side of the road. Those types of considerations that, in order to keep it safe and functional, take an additional input of time. Any anomaly that we introduce to the system increases our labor input and our time input, and sometimes specialized equipment input. So yeah, there are those things that will increase with that type of facility.
Thank you.
Brandy?
I don't think I have any questions for Tyler.
Okay.
But
Well, that's fine. Tyler, we'll call you back up if we need you.
I do have a question for probably Les, maybe Gary. With the grant, which elements would be covered in that grant? Is it all those 8 or 9 common elements? I know that not all the bike and pedestrian elements would be covered by that.
Right. Generally speaking, it would be the common elements, so the raised pedestrian crosswalks, the lighting on the speed zone signs, the center medians, refuge islands. The speed limit posting is simple, the stop signs are simple. but-
Sidewalks?
So it
and the
covers,
sidewalk work.
so it would
is the
cover
biggest.
all of the common elements. It's anticipated to, or?
It is anticipated to cover all of those common elements. And we have some possibility of adding perhaps some additional treatments on the side streets in the form of curb bulbs to help improve the pedestrian safety along the sidewalk system of Third Street itself. So that's something we'll be looking at if the grant comes through as we anticipate.